Hi.
Hi, wow.
Hi. So it's great to be here and great to be here with you. And I want to talk about the partnership that led to Gaycation, which is, for those who haven't seen it, I found it incredibly moving and kind of a new way to do a travel log and travel reporting, or just it's kind of its own thing, because you took a theme and went to these countries and really looked deeply. How did the two of you, first off, how did you meet? Because it's clear that you're very old friends. So I'm interested in how you guys became friends and how that eventually led to doing this series for VICE.
You start, yeah.
Well, Ian and I met about 8 years ago, and we met on an eco-village outside of Eugene, Oregon called Lost Valley. Ian was having things going on in his own life that brought him to that place of wanting to learn more about sustainability and growing food and what have you. And I was going through similar things and went to study permaculture design and eco-village development for a month, yeah. And that's where we met, and we sort of just, it was immediate, it was one of those immediate bonds. And I remember wanting to go to Portland on the weekend to look at urban permaculture, and I just said, hey, like, you're cool, do you want to come? And that was kind of that, honestly. And it's, I mean, to me, this friendship is like true love, I don't know who I would be without Ian,
Huh. And same for you? Was it like, love at first sight?
It was, yeah. Sorry, I'm new to these kind of microphones. I feel like I'm in a boy band kind of situation. Watch out. Yeah, I mean, I was living in New York, and I was working more as a curator at the time and working for an art collector, and I was young and sort of having an existential crisis, if you will, like we all go through in our 20s, late 20s. And I was sort of conflicted about my own artistic expression and integrity versus like working in an art world and an art market and learning about all of those, about money, and I wasn't that interested in that. So I sort of I quit that job, and I met these kids who were running at a vegan restaurant where I worked, and I was newly vegan, so I was very curious about independent living, self-sufficiency. And these kids I met at this vegan restaurant had a veggie-powered school bus, and they were going to drive cross-country, and they invited me along, and I said, oh, what the hell, let's do it. So I rode with these strangers cross-country. We had a whole, that's from my memoir, that story, but then I ended up in, at this place called Lost Valley, and they had accepted me as what they called like a woofer, which is like world organic farming, and you live there and you work, and they let you live there for free. Yeah. And then then this course came about, and I met Ellen. So I'd already been there 3 weeks, like living amongst really interesting people, and what I thought was sort of, it wasn't off the grid, but it was, I thought I was removed from a lot of the world. And then comes Ellen Page, and at the time I had not seen her films. I had just seen her, it was the Oscar buzz was happening, so I clearly had seen her on the television, and so I knew who she was. But I don't know, yeah, it was an instant sort of, we do call it a love story, but I think it's that you're just looking at someone and you're like, they're actually, I've seen you on TV, but you're just so interesting in person. The atmosphere around you radiates depth and then like a subtle electricity or something. And then we, I don't know, and then gradually we just started taking these trips together, and we're like sleeping in the same bed in the hotel. And
But I thought you guys were gay.
we're gay. We're gay as ever, yeah. But that, that was part of the journey.
Like that was a part. I remember like driving the rental car up to Portland and thinking like, because at that time it took me a while to be like, I'm a girlfriend, And I remember thinking like, oh, what's this going to mean when we get there or something? And then obviously we began to talk about it and connect on our, our own journey in regards to how we were feeling in relation to our identity.
And that actually, is that what sparked your desire together to go to different countries and look at what gay life is like? How did this particular project for you come about?
Well, it came about pretty just naturally and organically. Spike Jonze is a dear friend of mine who I've known for years, and I was staying with Spike briefly in New York, and he's a co-president of Viceland, of the new network that Vice has launched, and he basically just said, hey, we're going to launch a network if you have any ideas, and then a day or two later, I was like, oh, I do have an idea. It's called Gaycation. It's about, it's essentially a travel show, but it's about going to a country and focusing solely on the LGBTQ community and culture in that country. And Vice really liked the idea, and then the thought, was I immediately thought of Ian, and not only do I know Ian and how he exists in the world, he's curious, he's open, he's deeply compassionate, he's adventurous, and then I knew, Ian had been working on a documentary film that is, he's still working on, is in post, and I'd seen a lot of that, and was just so moved by his work and the uniqueness of his work, because he really does just, has embedded himself, in a community, and admired his work at the Civilian Theater Company in New York, which involved a lot of interviews and investigation, and it was just like, I knew it was perfect. And then he came in and met everyone and did screen test and, and everything, and so sort of that's how it all came together. But we've always wanted to collaborate. We've always wanted to work together, and to have this be it and be sitting with you right now is very, it's still very surreal for us, honestly, because we are just such close friends. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's 2 years ago since you publicly came out, and I wonder to what degree doing a show that was a travelogue about what it's like to be, gay, lesbian, transgender around the world is actually a part of a process for you of self-discovery. And I would say that for each of you, because it felt to me like this journey was also one of self-discovery for both of you.
I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure.
Was that a hard question? I don't know, maybe that was
No, I'm sure naturally that's what it is, because needless to say, you're relating to situations, and then many times you're in a situation where you can't even fathom what it's like to go through that, and I think for me, it really was about wanting more representation, because I knew how much it meant to me at like 14 in Halifax, Nova Scotia, to be stumbling through the TV to find But I'm a Cheerleader. And when Natasha Lyonne's like, oh, I don't get it about French kissing the guy, I was like, neither do I. And that meant something to me. And I do think when there can be such loneliness and isolation when you're growing up in a society that does infuse this idea in you that you're different or something's wrong or you're sinful or what have you. And to be able to have the opportunity, let's be real, it's like just to get to travel is a privilege unto itself, but to have the opportunity to make a show, and the show's not us, of course our friendship's a part of it, but the show's all these extraordinary people we're meeting around the world, and yeah, I'm sure I want to feel, I think when you know that you've gone through your own sort of, journey or your own process that had some kind of difficulty, but then I'm a privileged person, I live in Los Angeles, I have done a job that has given me money, and I can walk down the street and kiss my girlfriend, and I think a lot about those who are much more vulnerable than me and around the world and in the United States, and here's an opportunity to go make something that allows voices to be heard that sometimes you just don't ever hear, and hopefully reflect struggles that a lot of people go through that I think a lot of people just simply don't know about.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this process, I think one of the things that I guess, as a journalist struck me is the situations, your safety, at certain points, because in the process of this, you talk to people, not just Ted Cruz, who that got a splash even before Gaycation came out. Your conversation with him, but to talk to people who, as you're talking to them, don't wish you well. And it's interesting. I will say, because it's not something I hide, I'm gay, and I have in my career, years ago when I was in New York and the Jewish Memorial Museum was opening up downtown, I was doing a story about the fact that the Orthodox Jews didn't want pink triangles in this memorial. And I had to sit there and talk to this guy, and in my job, I never talk about myself at all. But it is weird to sit there and talk to somebody who doesn't wish you well. It's a strange feeling. How was that for you guys? And were there times where in some of those situations it seemed like you never told the person you were talking to about your own personal life?
Yeah, I think for the most part, we did try to come in as two gay people. I mean, the name of the show is Gaycation.
Hard to hide, I guess. Yeah.
I think as a journalist, of course, you're trying to come in as objective as possible. I mean, we don't really consider ourselves journalists clearly because we have a bias entering the interview. So I think there is a balance, honestly, of like, okay, when do we bring it up? And I think that's a conversation we don't really have before. We just kind of feel it out in the moment. And Ellen is much more quick. I think we just have different interview styles, which is like why we're a great balance. I'm a little more like, let's maybe get all the details and then I'll swoop it in at the end and see what the reaction. Ellen comes in right out the gate in the appropriate time, and I'm always looking at her like, oh shit, girl, like you just said it. And I get a little fidgety, you can see me, I'm like, okay, maybe later. But I think the approach that we have is just, okay, we're as open-minded as we can possibly be, with also knowing a lot of information before we go into the scenario, right? So we clearly know in some circumstances that the people that we're interviewing don't like us or don't like what we're about, or they have murdered people like us, things like that. So we're kind of coming in a little naive, like how are we gonna navigate this situation? But it's always, I think you just have to say, I'm open. It's like a feeling of like, I'm just gonna remain kind of like cracked open and receive the information and be a container for the story. And then if there's a pushback, cool, that'll be interesting, or maybe not, I don't know. So that said, when you're talking to someone like the Rastafari in Jamaica, there's a moment there, I think, where we actually didn't get to tell him that we were gay because we actually needed access to one of a bingy, which was a celebration that they were having that night. So it was kind of like, how do we, like, if we tell him we're gay, is he going to allow us in? And we do need that. That's a great shot for the show. I mean, you are thinking like you're making a TV show, but also there was it's not in the show, but there was a confrontation of just differences in how we look at the world, and there's a man there who we understand where he's coming from and the circumstances of his country and his religion, and we're totally respectful of that. I just think it is difficult to be two gay people and have someone stare you in the face and sort of get angry about saying you have a deformity, and we bash people for that, and you have a disease, and we've already been through that in our lives, and we try to, on some level, say, okay, like we hear you, but maybe we can offer you a different perspective. And I think in that circumstance, we were able to relay a message, like a human connection that he maybe didn't have before, and there was a glimmer in his eye of like, I understand where you're coming from a little bit, and that was one circumstance we didn't have in a lot of the scenarios. So the
That's
cop,
what I was thinking
the
of,
cop
is that
who,
moment.
the ex-cop who is who admitted to us that he was killing LGBT people in his country. I mean, that we talk about that because it was just, we weren't necessarily scared. We had protection. We have a bodyguard. We have local producers that we put a lot of trust in, and they're very talented people, and they set that interview up in that favela, which we were so fortunate to have access to. And that was one of, the man entered the scene, and it just was an energy which I've never experienced. It was one of I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it felt evil, right? There was an evil vibe about it. And then when we were able to look him in the eye for most of the interview, and it was frightening because there was like something missing within his soul, which you could read in his eyeball, if you know what I'm saying.
And then when he knew we were, and then I say, I check in with everybody first because I'm potentially putting other people in danger, and I ask if everyone feels like it's safe to tell him we're gay because he's just said, you know, he
Yeah.
hates gay people and he wants them to die. And and then when he knew we were gay, he would not look at us. Like
It was done, yeah.
he wouldn't look at us. He was sort of backing away, and it was like, oh, you're the one that's uncomfortable. Okay.
Right, we ask him like, hey, because we ask him, I'm sure you've never talked to two gay people before, one gay person, and how are you feeling? Because we're clearly uncomfortable. And he's like, yeah, this isn't that, not something I like to do. So yeah.
So you didn't feel frightened, though. It was just more a sense of.
I mean, I think we'd be lying if we said we didn't feel frightened, but
we're not. Like, I think there's something that like switches off in your brain. You're thinking about the work, right? We are working. So as cute as we are as friends and navigating the world together, I mean, we take the work very seriously.
Yeah.
And so I think that we just, it's just about getting the story. And we know that it's probably going to be hopefully a great thing for the show. I mean, you're thinking about the audience and the power of us having these one-on-one interactions and hoping that the audience can go on that journey. So I think in that moment, though, we're really thinking about, I think if you can imagine what's going on in our head, it's less about us. It's more about like, oh my gosh, you're doing that to people in your country.
Yeah, it's about capturing that person and really, I mean, you're not quite putting a face to it, obviously, because he's, wearing a mask and stuff, but really saying, hey, this exists, and I think for the most part, you're not thinking about yourself because you're thinking about the vulnerable people who are walking the streets of Rio who might not know that this man is walking right by them or could run into or he might just run them over in his car. Like I think you do go into this weird space where and it might be bad, it might just be horribly naive, I don't know, but
I actually I do.
I mean, you must have had similar things as a journalist who's been to many places around the world. And
yeah, that's why I was watching it with curiosity and thinking, what must it be like to go from doing narrative fictional films to putting yourself in positions that are actually fairly familiar to me, where you're kind of watching other people. It's this kind of, you're there, but you're also stepping back because you're creating something in the process. You're thinking about, in my case, because I work in audio, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I also am just balancing, is the sound in here okay? Is my mic in the right position? Am I getting this person to talk? And that's what I'm used to. For you, who's coming from a different medium, what was it like to suddenly step out of the Hollywood bubble, the filmmaking world, the traditional filmmaking world, and go out into the world and make what's essentially a documentary?
I mean, it was nice. I think I've always loved travel shows so much. Like when I was a little kid, and then Anthony Bourdain, and I feel like I've always learned so much from them. And I do. When we started it, it was absolutely unusual. It was unusual to be in front of the camera as myself. That was like a strange feeling. I mean, maybe I've done it on like a talk show or something, but obviously in a film, that's not what I'm doing. And I think I will say I'm naturally a curious person, and I want to learn about people, and that is really interesting to me. And I want to know about people's stories and people's experiences, even people who I know potentially don't like me or because of just who I am, or maybe they just don't like me.
You could have been a public radio
fine.
journalist.
And that is, and I am fascinated by it. I am fascinated. Fascinated might be the wrong word because it's utterly disheartening, and it also makes you feel so angry. But it is baffling to me, the hatred that people have, and I do want to. What is that? Where is that coming from? And all of those things are, interest me, and a lot of these issues are what I read about and what I feel passionate about, and to have the opportunity to go with Ian and an extremely talented crew and the people that we're fortunate enough to work with at VICE and make something like this it really is just an incredible opportunity.
So yeah, it is. It's really colorful, actually. In going to all these countries and seeing gay life, and that part of it does feel like a regular travel program, and yet there are some places you go. All right, so the first one, which is in Japan, where there's a couple scenes or couple things that happen in that were kind of amazing to me. One was you can basically rent a friend in Japan. And this amazed me. I was like, really? You can rent a friend or a relative for like $33 an hour. So this young man who's gay wants to come out to his mother, and he rents a friend to come along. And they go too. And this scene is just, I couldn't imagine what you would have been thinking in a scene like that, that this young man wanted you guys and his rent-a-friend to be in the room while he came out to his mother. Yeah, you're looking, you're like, yeah.
I mean, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. And in regards to how I felt in that room and how, it did feel strange to us that the young man wanted us to be there to film him coming out to his mother, but it was, he in whatever, that was offering him some kind of support that was enabling him to do it. And that was spontaneous. That came up while we were in Tokyo. We were already going to do something on Family Romance, which is the company where you can hire if you don't have enough family members for your wedding or a funeral. And so a lot of LGBT have been reaching out to Family Romance for different reasons, either a gay friend to go out with you to maybe Nichime, which is an LGBT district in Tokyo, because they just might be, living without feeling like they know any LGBT people. And that's just one example. So that was a beat we were going to do. And then I think it was the day before it came up that this young man wanted to come out to his mom, and he wanted us to be there. And, we did have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are still talking about this scene for many reasons, and one is why does the mom want you there? That's invading her privacy. And so we did discuss the ethics of that situation. It's like, what does that mean for everybody that we're all in one little room and this woman is going to be exposed on some level, right? So we're very cognizant of that, and I think our way out of that is that, well, at any moment they can tell us to leave, get out of their apartment, not sign the release form. There are a lot of options for opting out. I think that what's powerful for me about that moment is I don't know, I've never experienced something so raw and intimate between two people. And I think you can feel our nerves and our emotions when you watch it. And I know some of you haven't seen it, so we won't talk about all the details, but I think from sort of like a filmmaker, producer perspective, you are thinking about ethics, but you're also thinking, if this, on one level, we have no idea how the mother's going to respond. So if you see the scene, she sort of is in shock, and you can read that so clearly on her face. And she sort of runs out onto the street, and the rent-a-friend says something brilliant to her, which we don't have the audio for. We're like, well, what did he tell her? Because he convinced her to come back in, and she was reconciling with it and thinking about the love between herself and her son and the importance of that. And I think that sort of trumped any sort of rejection she might have been thinking about. So I think when you're looking at it, yeah, we're in there. It's like raw emotion. We're so moved by it. We're so fortunate to be there. But from a producer standpoint, you're thinking that is a good scene. And that's a good scene because it's so raw, emotional. It goes from here to there. It's a great 15-minute scene. And we knew that was really going to impact people because it is good television, but it's also maybe not something you've seen on television before. And I think people are really responding to it in a way that's like their own struggles at home, their own relationship with their family, their own sense of shame and hiding. And so we're getting a lot of comments about that scene from people that are struggling at home.
Or people who've been inspired to come out, or, I was thinking about it and then I wasn't, and now this is inspiring me. And it's like this young man who made this decision and said, I want this filmed for, reasons, to be honest, I'm not sure, but we've seen by the beautiful things that people write us on Twitter, what have you, that him doing that has really moved a lot of people.
And to chime in, it's like on your question about Ellen being a celebrity, I think in that moment, that's where the power of you being in the public eye really shines, because that young man had seen your coming out, and was inspired by that. And I think that's why he wanted us there, right? He knew he was admiring of Ellen's courageousness, I think. And then, so in the moment when he sort of, he was nervous, he's wavering, his mom's getting ready to come in, what's going on? I could tell he was confused. And so he asked Ellen for, her own personal story, and you give it so authentically to him, and you have such an intimate moment, even though we're all around you. And I think that really gave him confidence to carry on. And I think that for me as just an observer was like that. Ellen came out of the closet, and because you came out of the closet and you're a public figure, we are now able to make this show, and it has impact, and people are watching it. And if you didn't come out of the closet, there's not a Gaycation. And so that it's different than just me going on a Gaycation and like with my friend who no one knows about. It's just a different journey. And I think sometimes celebrity can be finicky, and you have to, you maybe can't go to the war-torn places you want to go because you have more people involved, but you also have access. You get access that you wouldn't otherwise get because people have been inspired by your coming out story, and they feel confident to share that Ellen will do something right with their story. That makes sense.
I mean, it was amazing. He literally asked you to tell your story. It was like you were there giving him, support by telling your own story again to him, which was phenomenal to me. And of course, something as a journalist, I don't generally do those things. The camera work is also, is amazing because you really get a sense of intimacy. So I don't know how that was set up.
Well, basically, the reality was it was an extremely small space. It was a really, really, really tiny apartment. So we only could have one camera. And we work with, our cinematographer, Niall Kinney, who's shot, every episode. He's just so amazing. And we love him. We've all become obviously very close making the show. And he essentially was just in the corner and sort of navigating the situation by himself, which is hard, because for the most part, we usually have two cameras. Obviously, there's one on us, and of course we have a translator, and needless to say, we weren't interrupting their moment. We didn't have a translator being like, interrupting this young man as he was speaking to his mom. But so there's, and you have our sound, Doug, our incredible sound operator, and it was a very confined space, which ultimately really does capture what that moment felt like, and it's not like something I've experienced in my life. Yeah,
it's hard to do. It's hard to make people, when there's a microphone or camera in the room, it's hard to make people feel that comfortable. And so it's amazing, and a credit to both of you that you did, and that it worked out.
And I have to say that we were just watching a video of our editor Naharika talking about the edit of that scene, and it's not, and I think the thing is, it's like, it's not reality television, but it is, but it's not, and I think that she edited that in a way that was just to let it breathe. So that's part of the, we want you to feel the natural feelings that we're experiencing, which is like, we're feeling discomfort, we're feeling like really, uncertain, and I think she just lets it play out with minor cuts.
She's incredible, and she's so sensitive. Like, you feel her sensitivity, I feel like, in the cut. You feel her
and
navigating
so that matters
these
for
spaces.
That scene, right?
One thing I will say that was interesting to me as somebody who's seen you as an actress, and I feel like as an actress you have a kind of vulnerability that is really compelling on the screen, and in real life you had it too. I really did feel like somehow you walked into these situations, even when you're confronting Ted Cruz, where you really see, like, I'm just a person, I'm here, I'm vulnerable. And I sense that from you, that you were you allowed
You're
yourself.
You're going to make me cry right now.
But that comes through. I feel like your heart was really out there. I'm asking you to some degree. The question is really like, did you just say, okay, I'm going to be here? How did you walk into these situations?
I think that's exactly it. I think for us, it's about being human beings and entering into a space to have a conversation with human beings, and I think also when we're making the show, of course, we've done research, we've read the articles, we know the statistics, the political situation, the contradictions, and the heartbreaking stories, but So you know, there's that risk of going in with a preconceived notion or a judgment, and we do everything we possibly can to go in with as open of a mind and open of a heart as possible, you know, because we do live in a privileged way, and as gay people, and get to live our lives, and we want to make sure that we're entering these spaces and really just making it about, you know, just telling these stories, and that's, I mean, that's ultimately the goal. And I mean, for me, I think I don't know, you know, we do tend to be so afraid of vulnerability, and I see so much strength in those that are willing to be vulnerable, because it's scary, you know, and that to me is what potentially could create some kind of change, if we're willing to maybe be a little bit more open with one another.
I was going to say, technically, it feels like we both evolved in the 4 episodes, and I think I think for me it was that I came in maybe with more of a documentarian background and interviewing hundreds of people in a way that's like not like you do, but more open-ended, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd never been on camera, so that was a true adjustment of like how to be your authentic self when the camera's around. And you know what, you find out it's not that hard. You just kind of ignore the camera, or you play to it whenever you know it needs a funny moment. But Ellen was used to being on camera, but not used to interviewing people, and maybe not used to being herself. And so it was interesting to see, like in Japan, we're both figuring it out a little bit. Like, okay, I'm looking at the camera at the wrong time. No one told me anything. No one's fixing my hair or whatever, you know. But I think, to speak to Ellen, I just have watched, you know, I know you're my friend, you're sitting next to me, but if you weren't my friend and I was just observing the show, I think Ellen, I sit next to Ellen in awe of her ability to interview people, and her intelligence, and the way in which people tend to just trust her. So I don't, you know, it's a thing you have or you don't have. It's like you either have the instinct to know how to talk to people, and you have an energy about you which is open and giving, or you don't have it. And I think Ellen has that, but then is so politically and intellectually involved in a way that I'm not, and I'm always learning from her. And so I don't know, there's just something that I watch the show and I'm like, I think you got a career here that's other than your, you know, acting cool, but I see something. So, you know, I see my friend like blossoming, and I think that has to do with coming out, but I also think that has to do with the confidence of wanting to explore a world in which you couldn't do before because of your sexuality. Yeah.
And well, I do, you know, speaking of your career, it's still to some degree uncharted territory for an actress to be as open. I mean, Ellen DeGeneres, and I actually remember when you were on Ellen's show, and it was so moving to watch the two of you talk about coming out, and her being sort of the elder statesman, and kind of giving you, you know, yeah, I felt that too, and but it is kind of uncharted territory. So I wonder, have you noticed any difference in how people treat you? Is Hollywood come a long way? Do you still feel sometimes that maybe people aren't telling you something and there's roles you're not getting?
You know, it's hard, you know, truly and honestly, it is hard for me to know. You know, I'm not in rooms where people are making decisions of who to send what to, and the truth is I'm absolutely not focusing on it, because being in the closet hurt my career way more than being out and being happy and feeling inspired again, being able to, thank you, being able to infuse my authentic self with my creative interests. And that wasn't something I could do. And now I can make Gaycation. Now I can produce a movie like Freeheld. And I mean, I'm producing other movies. They don't all happen to have LGBT characters or be themed. But I'm producing a movie with Kate Mara and Christine Vachon. It's a love story between Kate and myself. And I feel so in love with what I do again. And I feel so grateful for that. I think the difference I see are these little things like, oh, you're doing this thing that's gay and this thing that's gay. It's like, oh, so now you're doing these. And I'm like, you would never even bring that up with a straight person. You would not say like, you're doing another movie where you play a straight person. Are you a little worried about it? And I'm feeling like you know, and like no judgment. I'm just saying like these are the double standards, and this is the conversation that needs to change, you know? It really does, because when I feel so grateful that I've had the opportunity to make the show, truly. Like I hope people know just the gratitude that I feel and the people I've gotten to meet, the most inspiring, brave, courageous people you could ever meet in your lifetime, braver than you could ever possibly be. And those are interactions I've gotten to have in my life. And yeah, if I was still closeted, I wouldn't be making the show. And let's think about how much that limits people, or limits people of all minorities who are not given opportunities to create work, you know? And we do a job that's about telling stories. Obviously, it's becoming clear that we can't just be telling stories about one group of people. And not only that, people need to have opportunity. And that's what's going to make the whole industry grow and blossom. And as a person who's involved with it, and as a person who's an audience member, you know, I really hope that starts to happen. And it's just been something I've been reflecting on in regards to, what if I hadn't come out? Well, anyway, I'm sorry, I just went on a tangent.
No, I mean you're moving me. I'm getting teary-eyed over here, actually, trying not to be. I mean, it's somebody who's older than you, and also remembering just quickly years ago a colleague who was from Alabama. She was African American and gay, and she was a good 15 years older than me, and this was still 15 years ago. She said, I can't believe how I never thought this would happen. And this was 15 years ago. So I have to say that looking at it from here and seeing you and sitting here with you now and everything that's happened, I'm like, wow, it has changed so much. And the fact that, you know, I mean, I do remember when Ellen DeGeneres came out.
And let's be real, like I'm lucky, you know, like if what Ellen DeGeneres did at that time was, you know, really extraordinary. And let's be real, it's like I don't think of myself as like, because I came out at all, you know. That's because of, needless to say, all of the people that have made that possible, you know. And now I do have the opportunity to get to do all these things, which, you know, a lot of people just don't get. And that's the reality of the world we live in and the industry that we're working in.
I want to open it up to questions from the audience. I do want to say one thing first, which is the one thing I'm hearing that's like really powerful is being yourself is the best creative juice. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We got a question over here. Do we have mics that go to the question?
Yeah, are you going to use these mics?
Do we have somebody, or do they line up? Or I see. I'm sorry. You have to line up. My bad. Right here, sir.
Okay. First, I want to say this project sounds great, Ian and Ellen. And as a parent of two gay 20-something children, one of whom, Ellen, had a huge crush on you before you came out, I think you are a tremendous role model. And you're the kind of person who changes the world. Because when someone who's a public figure comes out and is so articulate about it, so intelligent about it, and uses it with her creativity, it changes the world for people like my kids. And I want to say how much I appreciate that.
Thanks.
And she would be very jealous that I'm talking to you right now. But I have a question. You talk about it's kind of a reality show and kind of a documentary, and to me those are two very different things, because reality shows you sort of have to pander to a commercial audience. I don't know if Spike Jonze is giving you the latitude not to go in an exploitive direction, or if you ever feel any pressure about that.
Oh, absolutely never. You know, I think when we say that, I think we're just talking about how obviously that's been a big part of television, and Vice Land's, I think, taking that and doing it in a whole new way, in the sense of making it, you know, I think, you know, like you're talking about the camera work and Niall's work, our editor's work, you know, it's really beautiful. I'm so impressed by the people that we get to work with. And, you know, we're so concerned about being sensitive, about being responsible. And Vice and Viceland and everyone we work with has been amazing. They give us so much control, and
The reality TV part potentially could be because it's about two friends on a vacation, right? And I think that you want to enter through our friendship, which allows an ease into these really serious and sometimes devastating scenarios. But I think we make it very clear that it's not about our friendship. I mean, we don't want to have tons of us talking. We cut that out a lot, actually. So it's not about us making cute little jokes. You need that to like lift it a little bit. But so that's the only component where it's not full documentary, and we are host in a scenario. We have a bias. We're not coming in as journalists. So, there is a slight fusion, I think. But Vice, clearly is listening to us when we say we don't want that as a focus of our show. We want it to be about the stories we're encountering.
Thanks.
Oh. Hi, I work with queer media distribution for youth, and I was just wondering, putting things online is obviously a really great way to get things into the hands of youth because that's where they are all the time. But I was wondering if in terms of your distribution plan, if you have any reason that you're going to be doing any public screenings for youth or sort of like engaging directly with GSAs or anything like that, because I think that obviously there's a really great opportunity to have the lens of someone that they know and can identify with to go to these places that they're not otherwise going to be learning about LGBT issues from.
Totally. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. No, this is something we're absolutely talking about. I think, because Viceland like just launched and it's been about launching the network and what does that mean? And it's all so new, that's sort of been the focus and making sure that's free on YouTube and you can watch two free on Viceland, but then can everyone see it in the world and sort of navigating that space? Because, particularly if we're making a episode about Brazil, we want people in Brazil to be able to see it, but we've been talking about doing screenings and with different groups and making sure that conversation's existing in that space and is available to everyone. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you for the work and thank you for coming out. I think it's really wonderful. I have two questions. First one, I wanted to ask a little bit about intersectionality. You guys seem very aware of the fact that you're coming from a certain privilege into these communities. But how often were you encountering conflicting levels of prejudice, and how is that affecting the narrative in the final cuts for you?
Meaning, how against what we were doing, or more about what we were encountering in each country, or
Was it just you getting there and then you're seeing gay people having to deal with certain sorts of prejudice, or was it it's worse off now because she's a woman as well, or people of different
You mean in relation to the variety of experience within the community?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, you speak to it.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. It's it's something we're thinking about all the time, and we're trying to be more and more intelligent about. And we think about that from when we're thinking about entering a country. And you have to say, okay, if we're going to Jamaica, and we're two white people, and we are privileged, and we're privileged to do the show, we're privileged to enter the country. That is the first thought we have. What does that mean? What does that look like? So how do we recognize that? How do we allow our audience to be aware that that's where we're coming from? And then how does that color the how we encounter the stories? That's so we're speaking from our own perspective as two gay people, and then talking to a variety of different people. I think that within each country, the spectrum of LGBT and what people experience is just different, right? In our own country, trans women of color definitely have a much more devastating and difficult time, and we have to acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that in our show, and we try to expose those stories as much as possible. And I think also when you just think about traveling and just how difficult it is for various people to travel to certain places is one entry point. I think to speak about the trans experience, coming from a gay perspective, is that I feel from what I read and the stories I hear that it's just very difficult to be trans and to travel just because of the scrutiny you're placed in at TSA checkpoints and the misgendering that happens, and that just is a result of the binary gender system and the way that we are looking at gender these days. And I think that I don't know. That's a long.
Yeah, no.
I think we're trying to say we do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in there.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? And to the vulnerability thing, which I think is a big part of this, how often are you digging into yourselves for the moments that are happening? to create them? And how often do you think that they're just like happening and they're just rehashing your own experiences and just
How do you mean, like digging in, like, oh,
like if you're in an interview and you like, how often do you find yourself just like you were talking about the kid in Japan and having to share your experiences to sort of get him to come out of his shell? Is that happening more often, or are people just like gushing and you're finding that you're able to resonate with with the experiences that they're happening in your interviews? It might be a little weirder of a question.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, it does feel to me very natural. I mean, if you're asking, I feel like everything we're doing feels organic. I don't know. I don't feel like there's.
Maybe I'll bend your question a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about what I want to talk about. No.
Go, do it.
Okay. No, I think that to talk about the vulnerability idea and the reasons why people want to share their story, I think is like always a question. Like, why is it, why do you feel it's important that we're here, and that like why do you want to share it? I mean, I think we ask people that secretly, like why now? Why with the show? And I think also we run into conflicts where it's really dangerous for people to be vulnerable on camera because it's just dangerous in their country to be out on any level. So, I think that for on one plane, people are just very excited that people want to hear their story and that it's going to be in the media, and that they do trust that we're going to be responsible with it and not just exploit them and make it sensational. And we're coming from a gay perspective, so we come in with responsibility. People, I think, do trust that we're going to do the right thing with it, and I think that's where you get a sense of people. I think there's a relief in our interest, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like it feels very dangerous, and people are questioning why we want to share it. And that didn't, that's not your question, but
No, that's thank you
don't
so
know.
much.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
guys. It's phenomenal what you're doing. Thank you.
It's funny. This is just something I was thinking about as I was watching it. One of the sections, you go to all these different countries, and one of them is the United States. And I was thinking, well, you're Canadian, so I guess, this is a foreign country.
Yeah.
But I actually did wonder, are you still a Canadian citizen?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have a.
So you're
Green
because you confront Ted Cruz, who's an American politician. And
Well,
was-
born in Canada. But.
All right. Next question.
Okay, this has nothing to do with LGBT issues at all.
That's okay. It's
Yeah.
just it's documentary, reality
Yes.
TV. It's
Last fall, you became a public advocate for something known as the Elite Manifesto, a neo-communist piece of drivel which pretty much destroyed the New Democratic Party of Canada. Do you regret doing that, considering what happened?
No, I'm a big fan of Naomi Klein, and I think we probably just disagree. So.
we'll go. We're not going to have let's not have an argument about it. So we'll go on to the next person. I'm not sure what it is, but go ahead.
I promise it's not politics related.
Whatever you want.
So I just had to thank you both for doing this project, and I think to all three of your points, it can be frightening for any LGBT person to travel, especially if you don't fit the heteronormative standards for any lesbian or any young gay man that may dress a little more feminine, or for a lesbian that dresses a little more masculine. For me, for somebody that was born in the wrong body, I'm very fearful of those body scans at airports. They frighten me, and leading up to any trip that I have, it's a constant thought in my mind. So thank you for exploring that a bit more. And my question is for Ellen, for you, and for Ian as well. What are your hopes and your dreams for this series? Like, I think with such a big and important project, you have a certain goal in mind, an accomplishment. What would you like to see accomplished from this series?
Sure, I think it's not always necessarily, one specific thing. It's like you even right now just sharing that is like moving. I'm sorry that that's something you have to feel anxiety about. I mean, that just breaks my heart, and I wish that wasn't the case. And also thank you for, sharing that with everyone, and that makes people go, I didn't really necessarily think of what it was potentially like for a member of the trans community to just to just travel, let alone to go to a country where it might be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And I hope the show is, of course, it's celebrating the triumphs and the joys and the nightlife and offering representation and as much as we can. But I hope we can just show the struggles and the difficulties that a lot of people do face, that I think a lot of people just simply don't know about. They just don't know. And I think when we're hearing, a lot of the political rhetoric we're hearing right now, hopefully the show can say, hey, that's not just like a little soundbite. Like if we're in any way perpetuating a society that discriminates and treats people unfairly and doesn't strive towards true equality, you are causing a lot of harm. You cause a lot of harm in people's lives and a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty. And I hope the show maybe can help connect people to that, whether it's members of the community or straight allies or people who aren't allies or what have you, I mean, I think I've learned so much making the show, and feel so humbled by how much I've learned and the people I've met. And so I hope that's something we can maybe offer, I guess.
And I would just say that I feel like it's amazing because now we're getting feedback on the show. It's on YouTube. It's reaching so many, so many people, and the feedback has been so. It's something you wish for, right? It's just a thoughtful response. It's not like cool show, like you guys are cute. I mean, that's part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No. It's the adjectives are deep and they're emotional, and people are having a real connection to the variety of experiences they're watching. So what I take from that is that there was a need for these stories, and we're fulfilling that on some level. And I think that to speak to the bigger picture of just having, it's like go out and tell people stories. There's a lack of diversity in storytelling, especially on television, and I think that probably most people in this audience understand that. And it's not just about LGBT people; it's people of color. It's all minorities. We just need to be aware of what other people are experiencing, and if you're not experiencing that, just sort of like, and if you're a producer or a filmmaker, just take the time to educate yourself a little bit or to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I just think that makes for better content everywhere, right? And I think so for our show, we want to do that, but we just want people to have some sort of visceral reaction. Hopefully they like it, but it's cool if people don't, and we can create a dialogue and have a real conversation, because we're getting such amazing messages, like, essays about people's personal experience because they watch the show and they feel it's time to share that on some level. And so
Thank you so much.
The interwebs is amazing, isn't it? I mean, really, just in terms of diversity of content. One more question, and then we got to go.
I got lucky, good. So I'm a fellow journalist, I must say, from Brazil. You guys were talking a little bit earlier about the favela interview and the masked guy and how intense and tense was it. And it made me think about the interview with Representative Bolsonaro, who doesn't wear a mask, but he represents thousands and thousands of Brazilians who agree with his anti-gay policies. How was that encounter? And it was as tense and intense as the one with the masked favela guy?
Yeah, I mean, a little different, of course, because, the energy that's there. But, it was, I did a lot of research, obviously, about Jair Bolsonaro, and we'd met with Jean Willis, and so I'd known about a lot of the things he said. And, I think when I arrived there, he was very, welcoming, and definitely seemed to soften his point of view. And, what can I say? It's like it's such a disheartening thing to hear. And when you're also in Brazil, and I'm talking to, have you seen the whole episode? You've seen the whole episode,
yes.
Yeah. And the woman I was speaking to had lost her son, which was, it's hard to sit there and, needless to say, listen to a politician who's perpetuating any kind of environment that is discriminatory, that has these kinds of consequences that manifest out of an environment like that. So yeah, it was it was an intense conversation for sure. Yeah,
There were a few intense conversations. So I want to thank you guys so much for taking this really amazing journey. I know you do want to make more of them. And so I personally will look forward to that. I really enjoyed them.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both.
so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.